Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another preview podcast for the Tip Sheet. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me to break down all the round 2 action in the senior football as well as the round 7 action in the junior representatives is my good mate Sixties. Big fella. It's a bumper week last week for the Parramatta Eels. Big win in the NRL. We had a bit sort of mixed bag results below that, but some good stuff happening in the Lisa Fiaola and the Harold Matthews. And we're really looking forward to seeing what happens this week as we have another super weekend of action.
Yes, mate, another 7 games for us to preview. And again, for the junior reps, they're split with where they're playing. We've got some down in Melbourne and some up here at Granville, but we'll be covering the Granville game, so we'll be talking about that shortly. Mate, one thing that I always enjoy is when people come up and say g'day or let us know they enjoy the podcast or that they listen and that sort of thing. And we had some people that came and said hello to us at the end of the podcast appearance in the Leagues Club on Saturday night, which was brilliant. And also want to send a shout out to a couple of New Zealand listeners. We've sent a shout out before to Vanessa over in New Zealand. And this time I want to say g'day to Kevin and Yvonne, who are also listeners from New Zealand. Thanks for supporting us and get behind the Cumberland Throw and enjoying the podcast, and hope you continue to listen to us well into the future.
Well said, mate. And speaking of shout-outs, as always, a quick shout-out to the sponsors of the show, Big Spin Golf, North Mead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan, and Parramatta. Not to mention Parramatta Leagues too, home of the Parramatta Eels, and our biggest supporters when it comes to promoting the Junior League and the Junior Representative Pathways. So thanks to all three for helping the Tip Sheet get out every episode. And before we jump into the preview, starting with those junior rep 60s, a little bit of housekeeping for the Parramatta Eels, some nice news for the NRLW. We know that Steve Georgiales has been building that team ahead of the 2024 season and has been a big extension or re-signing. Young gun and probably the breakout player of the year alongside the fullback Kasitoe Hiku in Tyler Amiatu has re-signed. The club's built it as a 2-year extension, but I believe she was contracted this year, so regardless, she's signed up until the end of next year, so going to run around for the Eels for at least 2 more seasons, which is good to see.
Yeah, quite a breakout season for her first year last year. She really made an impact when she first joined the team. So looking forward to see how she's progressing this year. And, I think she's only going to become a better player. And you can imagine what she's going to be like next year as well. So I think that's a terrific signing. Steve did say that the next time we spoke to him, he might have some signing news. Well, he's probably going to end up being true to his word. We will be speaking to him very soon. People can look forward to a podcast getting some updates from Steve Georgiales about the juniors and maybe a little bit of signing news or just talking about the signing of Tyler when we next speak to him. So looking forward to that as well, John.
Yes, indeed. Action this weekend, well, I think chronologically actually kicks off with the New South Wales Cup, but in terms of our previews, we're going to start in the Junior Representative Pathways out at Eric Tweedale Stadium, Saturday morning, 60s, 10:45 a.m. The Eels actually going back-to-back to Red Rooster, it looks like, taking on the Chooks last week, taking on the Central Coast Roosters this week with that 10:45 a.m. kickoff in their home turf. Looking at the team, 60s, I think there's a couple of changes and people being shuffled around after that big win. We start at fullback with Logan Lamusu. On the 2 flanks, you have Fia Freedom Crichton Rapati and Sienna Bonello. In the centres, Mitzi Cairns and Essence Arlaw. Halves, Sharon Latupu and Aliyah Sufan, which I believe is unchanged. Fontaine Tafua, who's been dominating lock forward, moves into the front row this week. She'll partner Shia Tokolich there. Anika Penatani starts at dummy half. In the back row, it's Leia Kuick and Daniil Sekold on the flanks. Kalia Gray moves into that starting lock position from the interchange. She's been quite strong in the rotation. Gets a chance to start this week. On the interchange now, Bowie Marchong, Evelyn Kwendu, Mere Sivo, Aaliyah Scrivens, and the reserve is Anna Vave, although Scrivens has the 18 and Vave has the 17, but they're listed in the reverse order, so take that as you will. Eels, 60s, probably the second hottest team in this competition. After that round one loss to the Dogs, they've just built and built and built, and now they're really revving into top gear and a chance to consolidate their position at the top of the ladder behind the Bulldogs now.
Yeah, first of all, shout out to Mary Sivo's family. I was sitting next to her mum in the stand last week covering the game, so she was an absolute delight to chat to, and her and I think it was Mary's father were in all their Eels gear, getting behind the team, supporting them. So if they're having a bit of a listen now, as I said, shout out to them. Mate, that was a demolition last week. It was like the foot was put to the throat of the Roosters, and there was just no taking the foot off. They just, it was so comprehensive, mate. It's trying to find the words to describe how much they showed no mercy to the Roosters. Like, there were times when the Roosters were doing everything in their power to get out of their half, but the defence was just like they literally were belting the daylights out of them in defence. And really because of that, they were getting great possession, because the Roosters' kick was, if they got to their kicks, because there were a few errors that the Roosters were making, but if they got to their kick, the Eels were generally fielding it, and they'd be back over the halfway on the first or second tackle.
Just dominant in territory there. So
so look, it's much like I've spoken about with the Harold Matts team. It's a very well balanced side.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the forwards who are doing so much damage through the middle, and then you've got the backs that, well, last week just taking full advantage of the space that was coming their way. It was look, it was a really enjoyable game to watch. Mate, as you know, I am not as adept at you at watching the game and trying to blog at the same time. I can assure you there was a point there. I reckon I was 2 tries behind.
Just trying to catch up. When someone goes back to back or back to back to back with the scoring, it becomes an absolute nightmare trying to get your updates out.
Oh, so. that period, there was a period just before half time where they must have scored about 4 tries in the 10 minutes before half time. And
absolute chaos for you.
Oh, it was. I was having to. I was still describing the first try when the kickoff was taken, and I think they were straight back downfield. So I had to stop the description to watch what was happening with that, and then they're scoring, and then I'm then trying to finish off the description of the first try, and then they're getting towards the kickoff just as I finish the description of that. So I'm now a complete set behind. And then they've marched downfield again straight away and almost scoring like straight away. So now I'm 2 tries behind. And then I think they managed to, just when I thought they were finished for the half, they squeezed another one in. It was, it was unbelievable. I was having to laugh. I was that far behind. I was having to laugh. And then I was trying to remember how best to describe each try after that. So, very entertaining. I'm expecting that they will continue on their winning ways. The gulf between how they performed in round one and how they're playing now is enormous.
Yeah.
Because they're playing with so much confidence well.
There was nowhere near the amount of self-belief and conviction in their ability to win a game that we saw in round one as opposed to the weeks after. So really, really fun to watch their growth, their journey so far. And, of course, you're speaking about Update 60s. You can catch this game live on TCT. We'll both be out there to share updates as part of that 2-game battery at Eric Tweedale. And, yeah, like you, I think this is going to be a good win for our girls, assuming they play anywhere near their capabilities as they continue to chase the Bulldogs at the top of the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm gonna tip a win, and I'm gonna tip them to win by 18 plus.
Yeah, I think they've got a chance to really build a score here. So I think they're going to win and win handsomely, which brings us to the second game there, part of that 2-game stretch at Eric Tweedale, the Tarsha Gale in action against the Canberra Raiders. Eels coming to this team looking like this with Dallas Graham-Wivell at fullback, Aisha Rain Pietes and Howie Bell on the flanks. In the centres, it's been that way for, I think, the entire season. Caitlin Pearden and Lindsay Tui, no surprises. In the halves, Rafaela Perigo and Aaliyah Hamano. Front row sees Khaleesi Mahe and Liana Dimick on either side of Rory Muir at dummy half. Leela Black, Bella Sanford and River Lee Arlo round out the back row. On the interchange, Charlotte Corfin, Michaela Bourne, Aaliyah Ganoom, Ciara Stockham, and the two reserves, Loseline Sikaheli and Keely Stevens. Eels come into this game, if I can just quickly pull up my ladder, sorry. I know they come off the back of a last start loss, but looking at the Tarsha Gale Cup, the Canberra Raiders occupy 7th on the ladder, Eels in 10th, 2 wins for the Raiders, 1 win for the Eels, so in terms of on-field performances, not too much of a difference there, 60s. And if they're going to make any sort of noise in the run home to the finals, assuming that it is a top 8, got to get the job done on the weekend.
Look, it might sound strange to say this, but I thought that was the best performance of the season for the Tarsha Gale in going down to the Roosters last week. We know what that Indigenous Academy team is like. Now, have they rectified the errors? No. That was, again, their downfall last week. But the spirit in their defence had to be seen to be believed. Like, they refused to yield. And although the Roosters got 5 tries that they scored, they really scored them in a quick patch where it was, I don't know, it was, there was a little bit that went their way, but that period just before half time, the Eels conceded 3 tries, but they were literally defending in their quarter for the best part of 20 minutes before the first try was scored. Don't get me wrong, when the Eels had periods where they had possession and were making great inroads, like the forwards were driving through the middle, making great meters in the set of 6. The trouble was, as per usual, that completions let them down again. Now, towards the end of the game, and this is, I think, gives a bit of an indication as to what I was talking about with the attitude and the spirit in the team. They were defending set upon set upon set in their red zone, the Eels, and they just refused to let the Roosters build on the score. Like, it was 26-0. It was a warm day. You could be forgiven for thinking that the Roosters were maybe going to get the better of the defence later on. But no, they kept the scramble was amazing. Anyway, the Eels ended up getting the last 2 tries. They spun the ball wide in their own quarter line for a breakdown field by Caitlin Pearden. She was brought down about 30 metres out from the Roosters line. This is after spreading the ball, as I said, in their own quarter. And there was a flop. The Roosters player got sin-binned, and within about 3 tackles, the Eels were over under the post. Now, you might go, oh, well, the Roosters were down to 12 players at that point. No, the Eels were making inroads before that, and they made that long breakdown field against a full team. They just kept having a crack, and then after that, their last try that they scored, which I think was a couple of minutes after that, it was a beauty. The ball was kept alive on the last tackle. At one stage it was out wide to Lindsay Tui. There was a bit of a wraparound with one of the other players, and then the ball ended up in the hands of the winger, and I think Peters it was, and she was over in the corner. And at that stage, I thought they might even pull back another try. Well, time ended up running out for them, and I think there was a couple more errors from the team. But in all honesty, they would have given themselves a lot of hope out of that game, a lot to look forward to for the last 3 rounds. I'm going to tip them to win this one, 40.
Oh, I
think they'll beat the Raiders.
I mean, if they show the sort of conviction that you're talking about against the Roosters 60s, then they're going to be hard to beat for most teams outside of the Indigenous Academy and the Bulldogs. So I am keen to see if they can minimise those errors and give themselves a fair shot here. The win,
John, just have a look. Have a look at the top of that ladder.
Oh,
the
the
Gale.
Fiaola and the Gale ladders are quite interesting because we mentioned the Fiaola being good for the Eels. They are in second place this week. They've been dominant in their stretch recently, 60s. They've got a for and against of 88 in the Gale. Sorry, the Fiaola. The Dogs have a differential of 294. And then you go to the Tarsha Gale, where, the Steelers, the Roosters, and the Bulldogs are on top, and they're all healthy in the triple digits for their points differential.
And who have the Eels played?
Yes, the Eels have played the Steelers, the Indigenous Academy, the Bulldogs. Haven't played the Seagulls, but yes, they've played the best three teams there, and they were all away except for the Indigenous Academy. Who else did they play that was a handy team there? They played the Sharks too, who are in top six, so that's all been away. And so we mentioned it, but in a night we talked about in the NRL how a rough draw can set you back across 27 weeks. You got a 9-week competition here. You drop one game, and that can be the difference between making the top 4 and making the top 8. If it's a top 8 this year, we're not sure. We haven't been able to get clarity on that. It's been a top 5 in recent years. So it's, one game has that much weight in this competition, let alone playing 3 games in a row to start the season against high-tier competition. So they've look, as much as they've been their own worst enemies at times, 60s, they've had dreadful luck.
Oh, in their first 5 games, to draw those 3 teams plus the Sharks,
yes.
right? That's a draw of horrendous proportions, because to put it into perspective for our listeners, it's a 13-team competition. There are 8 games that they play, right? So there are 5 teams that every team doesn't play. And you can bet there won't be too many teams that have to play all 3 of those top-of-the-table teams.
Yep.
And there will be teams who probably qualify for the finals who maybe might only play one of them. I haven't done an in-depth analysis of the draw, but it's you know that there's going to be teams that wouldn't have had the draw that the Eels have had. And, look, that's not excusing the fact that they've been, to an extent, the masters of their destiny in terms of completions. But, that's as rough a draw as you get.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is.
So we wish them the best of luck. I do like your prediction that they're going to get the chocolates this week, 60s. Going to be keen to see how they perform on Saturday out of Eric Tweedale. Again, catch that game live on TCT. Then we go south of the border. Eels hit the road or hit the air, depending on their mode of transport. Most likely a plane, you'd think. Going down to Gotch's Paddock in Victoria. Doubleheader against the Storm for the Harold Matthews and the SG Boar. Kicking off at 12:45 p.m. for the Harold Mats. They get their star fullback, Cyrus Bloomfield, back this week after a 1-week sideline visit because of dissent. So he starts at fullback. Samuel Mardini and Lorima Rokasuka on the wings. Josiah Tua'u and Nathan Howlett in the centres. Talon Rosati, Lincoln Fletcher, as usual in the halves, been very strong together. In the front row, speaking of strong, Ryder Talangi and Ocean Vivella, 2 outstanding bookend prospects there. Ezra Leota at dummy half. In the back row, Kasinga Noah and Michael Nauer start on the edges. Mason Ong at lock forward. No Polly this week. He must be injured or suspended. 60s.
Look, I'm not sure. Towards the latter part of the game last week, there was a tackle that looked, I won't say it was a hip drop, but it was a nasty one, because Samuel was charging towards the line like he'd broken through, and one of the players was grappling with him from behind and basically piggybacked onto him to bring him down, and swung the body like you see in a hip drop, except it was up high, like it wasn't over the legs. So he didn't come down, from what I could see, he didn't come down on Samuel Polly's legs. However, Samuel Polly's legs ended up in an awkward position, and he had to stay down on the ground, and he was taken off the field for a period of time. I think he came back on later, but I'm just wondering whether he's ended up feeling the effects of that, and they're giving him a rest. So
we hope it's only a short-term thing, because alongside, not to say the other back rows haven't been good, but Nauer and Polly together have been outstanding on the edges. And if he is out for an extended length, it leaves the Eels down 2 of their core forwards, with Leviticus Funrayuta also still on the sideline, 60, if that nasty ankle injury he sustained a couple of weeks ago. But we move to the interchange now. Wesley Pakoti, Billy Fanene, Sanjay Ulukini, and Natutu Tasina Leota with Dylan Pryor. He's in 16, but again, I think he is the reserve player there. Eels in this grade, they're undefeated still. The draw to Canterbury being the only setback in terms of their win-loss draw record this year. They've been very good 60s. You constantly mention them as being such a well-rounded, such a well-balanced team. And I think that's probably the most succinct way to describe them. It's a great forward pack. It's a couple of really good but contrasting halves in Rosati and Fletcher. Lincoln playing that classic organising halfback role, Rosati being more of a dynamic ball runner. And then the back line, they've just got really solid strike. I know they've had to shuffle it around a little bit the last couple of weeks. Mardini and Tua'u have come in. But Hal and Rokasuka have been fixtures there. And Cyrus Bloomfield has been outstanding at fullback.
Yeah, interesting game last week. They really kicked out to a big lead. It was 22-1. I think it might have even been 26-1 before the Central Coast Roosters suddenly started piling on the tries. Now, they ended up getting 4 tries in that second half period. The pressure was on. Like they pulled up to a score of 26-21 with, I think, the best part of 10 minutes still remaining. Like there would have been about eight minutes or so still left on the clock. So there was a little bit of pressure being applied after it looked like the Eels were well and truly in control of the game. So maybe, although it stayed a win, that second half might have been a little bit of a wake-up call to guard against any complacency that they maybe were feeling. They ended up getting a late penalty, and Lincoln Fletcher, who, as you know, is a real sharpshooter as a goal kicker, he kicked a penalty goal. I'm thinking it was around about 35 metres from memory, something like that. So it was reasonably, centre field, but the refs were preparing for a short dropout, like a short drop at the 20 metre line. So they were expecting the goal to be missed, probably because of how far out it was. But look, I have to tip them again. They do so many things well for a 17s team, and I think they probably will look in the mirror a little bit about defence after letting the opposition get as close as they did last week. And I'm expecting them to easily account for the Storm, if they're playing anywhere near the best of their ability. Again, I'm going to tip an 18-plus scoreline.
Yeah, coming to this game, Melbourne Storm 8th place in the ladder in a 17-team comp. They're 2 wins from their 5 starts, Melbourne, so they're not red hot by any means. Eels should be firm favourites in pretty much all regards, except for the consideration of travel, and the flying down to Melbourne, how that might impact them. Even so, I'm going to tip the Eels to win and win well, like you 60s. It makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, now on to the final fixture in the junior representatives this week. 2:30 p.m. Following up there, Harold Matthews' brethren is the SG Ball at Gotch's Paddock in Victoria. Now we look at this team, and some names that have sort of crept into the lineup across recent weeks, starting to settle in now. 60s at fullback, Ollie McCarthy. On the wings, Muhammad Al-Madeen and Dom Faruja. 2 absolute fixtures in that regard. Corey Lee continues to play in the centres with Devonta Vivella at the other slot. In the halves, it's Lorenzo Talatina and Dylan Bredel. Javan Stevenson-Hala, Lockie Konakis and Kobe Herford are the starting front row. In the back row, Josiah Funa-Ayuda, Tyrese Lekeni and Max Popo. Those 3 have pretty much got those spots sewn up since round 1, so good to see him sticking there. On the interchange, it's Tyson Sanglang, Seb Piakala, Jai Camilleri and Elijah Shane Tapau-Taylor. The extended roster sees Mark Williams and Isaiah Murphy as the 2 reserves. Eels you talked about the Tarsha Gale having not like a good loss 60s, but a tough loss where they play competitive. Very much the same case here with the SG Ball playing against a good team, the Knights, and they just couldn't quite get the job done.
Again, this is going to sound strange about a loss, but I thought that was close to their best performance of the season. Genuinely, it was a good, tough game of football. again, a couple of errors at the wrong time were costly for them, and they really want to shut those down. However, if you're talking about consistency through the game, I thought it was just about their best performance of the season. They should win this one. The Storm, I believe, from memory, are sitting down near the bottom of the table.
They are 11th in the 16-team competition, yeah. So they're they got 2 wins from their 6 starts. So they're not terrible by any metrics, but they're not doing too hot.
Yeah, look, again, if the Eels continue the form that they showed last week against the team, and the Knights are second on the table in the SG Ball. So playing away from home against the Knights and only going down by 4 points, that was a really strong effort. But it wasn't just on the scoreboard. Like, it was a genuinely strong effort in the game. So I'm going to tip the Eels to win, and I'm also going to tip them to win comfortably. I'll go for 12 points or more, the margin to the Eels in the SG Ball.
I'll go for a narrow victory here. I think the Eels are the better team, but again, that travel factor could be something that comes into play. So Eels by a single-digit margin.
Okay.
And we move on to our first senior fixture of the weekend, 60s, and chronologically it's the final one, actually, of the day for all the 7 games we're talking about. The Eels in the Jersey Flegg taking on the Penrith Panthers. This one's out at St. Mary's Stadium. It's a Penrith home game. 3:15 p.m. on Saturday it kicks off. Eels backing up after a pretty tough loss to the Bulldogs and looking to get their campaign into gear for win over their Western Sydney rivals here. At fullback, we have Eric Tweedale. On the wings, Tamarere Simons and Charlie Scorovi. In the centres, Eric Va'afuasaga and Araz Namva. Interestingly, I believe they've swapped numbers from last week. I don't know if there's anything about swapping edges in that regard. They're 60s, but I believe that Eric was in the 4 and Araz in the 3 last week and vice versa now. In the halves, likewise, there's been another swap of jersey numbers. Mitchell Chester, named at 7, is now in the 6. Josh Lynn in the 6, now 7. I think that's more of a cosmetic change there, given that most halves tend to play down one side, sometimes combining 60s, but that is how it shapes up this week. In the front row, it's Sam Tuavaiti and Saxon Pryke. Riley Smith reprises his role at dummy half. Will Lewis comes into the team as the lone change this week, replacing Will Latu, who, again, we're not sure if it's injury suspension.
No, I can actually confirm.
There we go.
Yeah, I can confirm it's a 1-week suspension.
There you go. So Will Latu out on the sidelines for 1 week. Will Lewis in. Will Lewis, a good young player in his own right. So keen to see how he goes this week. 60s. On the average, Jock Brazel. At lock forward, Max Tupou. On the interchange, Paddy Spence, Damascus Nemia, Lance Lima, and LeBron Tuala. And if I just check the Jersey Flegg ladder very quickly, we look and see that the Penrith Panthers were first up winners with a positive differential of +10. So that a solid start to their campaign. Eels obviously looking to get their campaign underway now for a win over the Panthers. But it's going to be tough out at the opposition stomping grounds there in St. Mary's. And by their lonesome again with the unfortunate scheduling that leaves the Jersey Flegg as the sort of the unloved stepchild of the competition, doesn't it?
It does. I'm going to try to get out to St. Mary's for this on Saturday. Going from the junior reps at Granville over to St. Mary's, I'll see how I go with a few other commitments. But if I can manage it, I'd like to get over there. We had to leave early last week from Granville. The Flegg were on straight after the Tarsha Gale out at Eric Tweedale Stadium, but it was a real tight run between when the Flegg were due to finish and when the New South Wales Cup were due to start, and just the timing to get there after the game out down at the stadium and get parking and get into the ground and what have you. It was just a bridge too far with that one. So I didn't get to see the Flegg. Like to see him this week. Without seeing them, look, it's hard to give a pointer on where it went wrong for them last week. What we know is that the Eels have a very strong pack. There's no denying that. And then I look at the bench, and I'm very happy with the bench. They got some big units there, and the versatile Pat Spence they've got Josh Lynn playing half, and Josh Lynn's just had the NRL preseason under his belt, and he's was part of the winning SG Ball team, and then was part of the Flegg semi-final team last year. Well, preliminary finalists as they were. So he's coming in with a good form line, but and Arpa Tweedale also the same at fullback. He did the pre-Christmas with the NRL squad with the pre-season, and again SG Ball into Flegg last year. But there are some new faces that are there in the back line.
Simons, Varfuasanga, and Skorovi alongside Chester in the halves.
Yeah, so I think Simons and Skorovi, I believe, have come from the Bulldogs.
Yes.
Don't know too much about them. Not sure what the combinations were like last week. Really hard to give a tip on this. Might
as well call it a coin toss right now, because we just don't know what the team shapes up as outside the little that we saw them in the preseason trial 60s, and that can be a far cry from what you actually see in round one and plus.
Correct.
So outside chance of some updates or score updates on TCT for this one, depending on if you can get out there, big fella. I won't be able to make it, but if you are out there, obviously we'll set up some sort of blog for fans.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, we'll have to. If not, we'll try and get you some feedback in the review podcast, one way or the other, about how the game went. But that brings us to the two main fixtures that are out at Bluebet Stadium this week, and starting with the curtain raiser in the New South Wales Cup. You can actually catch this one on New South Wales Rugby League TV, assuming that you have either the subscription or the paid subscription or the 2-week trial available. Kicking off at 5:45 p.m. Eels taking on the Panthers, as you'd imagine, given that it's out at Penrith. For the Eels, they're coming off a 2-point loss to the Bulldogs in a high-scoring encounter at Combank in round one, with a number of young players starring in that narrow defeat. And as a result, I don't think there's too many changes in this team 60s. I think there is, one in the front row. So we have got two changes coming because of the two players coming back from fitness, from injuries there. So we start, as always, at fullback. Young gun Blaze Talangi had a pair of try assists last week. Made a couple of fumbles at the back, but it was a very encouraging performance in general. On the wings, Isaac Lumi and Hayes Dunster. In the centres, Samuel Louisiu bagging a triple hattie, a Pfeiffer, the old Michelle Pfeiffer there, and then Zach Sini in the centres. In the halves, Dejan Arce and Ethan Sanders work together once again. Front row, we see our first change for the team. Ofahiki Ogden reprises his role as starting bookend, but Wiremu Greg comes into the starting team this week after returning from a hamstring strain. Matty Arthur, who was, I think, pretty much inarguably best on field, even across both teams, their 60s, will start at dummy half and be asked to play 80 minutes, it looks like, this week, depending on how many Luke features off the 18th man position. In the back row, it's Matt Dury, Luca Moretti, and Makasi Makatara. I thought Matt Dury was very good last week. Keen to see him getting some more playing time there. Interchange sees Tony Mattielli come back into the Mix, like Wiremu had that hamstring tweak, and now he's back, so keen to see Tony ripping in. Dan Keir, Charlie Geimer, and Brock Parker round out the rotation. As I mentioned before, Manny Luke, the dummy half, is at 18th man. So as it stands, we're looking at Buds playing 80 minutes 60s, unless there is a change ahead of kickoff.
Yeah, look, he was sublime last week. And as you know, I kept a lid on talking Buds up too much in the preseason. And because we know how people react to someone being talked up. But he had a tremendous preseason. And his form in that game was no surprise because, to be fair, anyone who watched the SG Ball and the Jersey Flegg, that was a continuation of the form that he showed in both of those grades last year. So he's just simply brought that with him up into the New South Wales Cup. You mentioned some other strong performers there last week. Matt Dury, he was right up there with Woods as best on field. He made a number of line breaks. He was just really, really strong with his carries. Samuel Luizio had his like a real career highlight with getting a 5-try haul in that game. I thought Ofahiki Ogden was really, really strong as well.
He was good in the trials as well, so he's in a good position as a depth piece for the Eels right now.
Yeah, in fact, I thought the forwards and the forward rotation was that was really the strength in the performance.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of criticism of the Eels NRL for defence out wide. They really have to tidy that up this week, the New South Wales Cup, because there were tries scored that were probably a little bit too easy. But look, the other thing too, you touched on it. Blaze was so classy in attack last week. He is learning the trade at fullback. There was a couple of errors off kicks last week, and you know what? That's just going to come from spending more time there, because there was one kick in particular, and it was ugly, wasn't it? It was. You didn't know. You could see he didn't know whether to come in and take it on the full or wait for the bounce. And you know what? If I was calling out advice to him as it was happening, I didn't know which way it was going to go, because it just came so awkwardly off the boot. And in the end, he was caught betwixt and between, and it ended up obviously making a meal of it. But having seen an experienced and representative player in the Hammer have troubles out the back for the Dolphins on the weekend, you know that he's only young himself when I say experienced representative player, but he's only young himself. And, he's making errors as an acknowledged elite player in the game. So a player who's just playing his first, and I'll repeat, his first competition game at fullback.
Yeah, that was his actual debut in terms of a proper game at fullback.
Yes. So there is a lot of learning that Blaze is going to do. So,
the class there when he set up those two tries, like I said to you in the past, and it's not a one-to-one comparison, but the player that comes to mind with the ability to freely distribute the ball through contact like that is kind of like Joey Manu. And the backhand flicks that he was getting off down that left edge were just ridiculous.
Yeah. So it was, and you know what? And this is what I want. I really want to emphasise this. I've said it before. The best players have memories of a goldfish. They can put the mistakes behind them and not let it affect what they are about to do. And I've seen it now in the trials with Blaze, and in this first game, a couple of errors there, but
didn't get inside his own head, just reset and got back to work. Yeah,
exactly. Now, if he's got that in his makeup at 18 years of age, he's still a couple of months away from turning 19. If that's part of his DNA, if it's part of his character as a footballer, that he can just, put a tough moment aside and then just reset, get on with it, then he's got a massive future in the game. And I think we're all pretty well convinced that he does have a massive future in the game, but that is going to be a key part of it.
Going to be a good hit out for our boys too. Looking at that Penrith team 60s, you recognise names like Tyrone Peachy, Paul Alamotti, Dane Laurie, Brad Schneider, who comes to Penrith by way of Canberra, I believe. Luke.
Did he go to England in between?
I'm not sure. Maybe. Luke Summerton, who's played a little bit of NRL for the Panthers at dummy half. Maverick Geyer, who's a young forward on the rise. Matt Eisenhuth, very seasoned NRL player there. So it's not on paper, it doesn't look like it's a dominant Penrith team, but it's definitely a very solid one. So they'll give the Eels a very good hit out on Friday night. And again, you can catch this one on New South Wales Rugby League TV, which is nswrl.tv, if you want to get to their website there.
A quick question, John.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, did we, as well as winning the first grade both times against the Panthers, did we not deliver the double blow in Reggie's?
We accounted for the Panthers in round 4, 22-16. That was a good game. I remember that one. That was obviously the curtain raiser to the Golden Point, arguable game of the season in the NRL, where Cleary and Moses traded long field goals for that one. And then last round of the season, the Eels got the Panthers 34-24. You're right. I remember that game. Yeah.
It was Jordan Rankin's retirement game.
That's right. It was Jordan Rankin's retirement game, and the Eels stepped up to the plate massively for this one. So, yeah, we got the sweep in the 2 senior grades there last year, which is very, very rare to see for the Penrith Panthers.
Yeah, and I think the Flegg completed the hat trick on that last weekend.
In that last weekend, they did. Yes, absolutely. They were coming into the finals red hot. Only the 4-1 game short of the grand final against the Roosters. So that was with all those SG Ball premiership winning players. Obviously, we mentioned plenty of them in the preview today, from Flegg right through to the New South Wales Cup. So that brings us to the main event, those 60s, with the Eels taking on the Panthers in the NRL Round 2, Bluebet Stadium. I believe it's an 8 o'clock kickoff, if I can just get my notes up here. It is an 8 o'clock kickoff. There we go, Friday the 15th of March. We'll start quickly with a look at our opposition this week, 60s. And it's also important to note that the Panthers coming off a very rare 8-0 shutout defeat at the hands of the Melbourne Storm, an undermanned Melbourne Storm. So they're going to be fired up for this one, as if it wasn't bad enough that it's their home season opener, or season home opener, whichever way you want to phrase it. They're coming off a very humbling defeat against Melbourne, and they look like this. Dylan Edwards rocking the Chrome Dome these days at fullback. Sania Taruva and Brian To'o on the wings. First parts of a very, very impressive backline that now features Isaac Tungo, who just re-signed until the end of 2028. Long contract there for a very talented young centre. And really, Will Pennisini's contemporary, I suppose, in terms of age and skill. And then the outstanding Taylor May, who was very, very good against Melbourne in round 1, In the other centre role, in the halves, Jerome Luai and Nathan Cleary, it's been the mainstays of their premiership pushes for the last 3 years, so no surprises there. Front row, Moses Leota, James Fisher-Harris, Mitch Kenny's back, so he starts at dummy half. Scott Sorensen, likewise, in a double boost for the Panthers, comes into the starting back row after missing round 1. Liam Martin and Isaiah Yeo round out their starting back row. Sonny Luke, Lindsay Smith, Liam Henry and Luke Garner on the interchange. Extended roster, you mentioned most of those players, all those players in the Cup team just then. Dane Laurie, Eisenhuth, Geyer, Alamotti and Schneider. And then we have match officials there. Yeah, and in terms of neutral stuff, Ashley Klein for the whistle. Oof. You got Sutton and Nguyen on the wings, or on the sideline, sorry. Grant Atkins in the box. The dream team. Yeah, this is a bit of a dream team in terms of officials there. But yeah, look, a lot's been made in recent times about Parramatta's dominance against the Panthers in the regular season. Then Penrith sort of flipping the script in the finals, and then obviously Penrith's form in general, and it sort of dominated a lot of the discussion this week. I did see the two halfbacks, Moses and Cleary, trading compliments almost in a battle of who can be nicer to the other in terms of who is a great halfback, which is funny to see. But I know we've had the wood on them 60s. We swept them last year. We were accounted for like 60% of the regular season losses or something like that, or 50% of the regular season losses in their premiership run. So obviously it's always a fascinating matchup, producing some of the best games of the year in a given season. But geez, even with all the losses, and I will say that their bench does look weak. Luke Smith, Henry Garner, that starting team is still a sight to behold.
Oh, I was about to say to you, my next words were going to be, show me any weakness in that starting 13.
Yeah. Just seriously, maybe dummy half. Mitch Kenny, like you could argue, is like a competent dummy half, and even then, it's not like he's a terrible player. He's just in a team that already funnels all of its ball playing through the 13 and the 7 primarily, with that shape that they love to use there. You don't need a dominant dummy half, and Mitch Kenny is, in a way, the perfect foil for their system. So their backline's as strong as it's ever been, 60s. They've lost so many players. They lost Stephen Crichton this year, and Taylor May comes back from an ACL injury looking better than ever. I already said that Isaac Tungo is, an outstanding young centre. Taruva emerged, I wouldn't say from the clouds, because we saw him in New South Wales Cup in years prior and could see that he was a good talent. But Taruva, To'o, Tungo and May, just ridiculous. And you can see why their forward's always fresh, because they've got 4 absolute, not just like workhorses, but weapons in the back line there that just set them up.
John, they have arguably 11 or 12 game breakers in their starting 13. Mm-hmm. And that's, I don't think I'm exaggerating that, because and that's maybe throwing Mitch Kenny into the category of not being a game breaker. And then you almost look at the rest of them and go, they have the capacity on their day to make a difference in a game. Every one of those players that are there. So, I mean, it's like, do the hard yards till there's interchanges, mate. Obviously that's not Parramatta, because Parramatta will come out and they'll do as is always said, chase the collision. So let's read through the Eels lineup and see how they match.
Yeah, big win over the Bulldogs in round 160, so no surprises, even with reinforcements coming to the overall roster with Greg and Matteoli bolstering their playing stocks. There's been no changes to the starting the top 17, which means at fullback, captaining the team, Quinton Gufferson. Bailey Simonson will reprise his role on the left wing. Sean Russell on the right. Will Penasini and Morgan Harper in the centres. In the halves, Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses, as we expect. Reagan Campbell-Gillard and Junior Barlaw named to start, although we did see Junior slip back to the bench ahead of kickoff in round 1, so watch that space. He did a very good job coming off the rotation there. Joey Lussick starts at dummy half. Sean Lane, who was very good on the left edge, will be in that back row slot. Done one better by Bryce Cartwright. He's got the brass balls, though, I suppose, there, who got the 6 Dally-M points in round 1. He was outstanding. We gave him his flowers, deservedly 60s, and he looks to play against the club he actually debuted in. Do you see that article that came out this week about Bryce saying how he wished he'd sort of come under Brad Arthur earlier in his career? Yeah, that was... I mean, it sort of speaks to everything we've been talking about, and it was a really nice insight into where Bryce is at as a player. At lock forward, another former Panther, Jermaine Hopgood, going up against his old club. On the interchange, Brendan Hands, another former Panther. Ryan Madison, Joe Ofengahi, and Kelma Tuolungi. So like we said, unchanged 1 to 17 on the extended roster. The two primary reserves, Ogden and Greg. Then you got Luca Moretti, Makasi Makatoa, and young gun Blaze Tuolungi rounding out their extended roster. Already talked about the match officials there. Eels, same roster, no surprises. We knew that there was going to be a selection headache in terms of the bench when everyone's available. But when you win and win handsomely like you did in round 1, I think it sort of streamlines the selection process for Brad Arthur just a little bit there.
Yeah, so I think whilst they're winning, it's unlikely that you're going to see too much in the way of change, even on the bench. And perhaps the only thing that might cause a change is if BA decides he wants to go with 4 forwards rather than the utility role that Brendan Hands is able to offer off the bench. But last week he was obviously able to give Joey Lussick a spell late in the game, and you would think that I think depending on the workload that's happening for the forwards this week, maybe you might see Brendan getting a run a little bit earlier, maybe towards the back end of the first half. I guess we see how that first half goes and how Joey Lussick is pulling up, but no question that Joey Lussick played a very, very capable game last week. It was a cracking 40-20 that he kicked. It was basically a 30-20, wasn't it?
He struck that sweetly. I saw coming out of dummy half. I was like, geez, is he going to kick it? And then he made me eat my word very quickly. Absolutely boomed that off the boot. One of the best.
Your dummy halves, they practice that.
Yeah.
When they're practicing, they're basically practicing as kicking out from dummy half. So they go through the actions of like picking the ball up, stepping to the side and drilling it. So it's not unexpected to see that happening. Reid Marnie, he was always last off the field when he was at the Eels because he'd be out there practicing kicks from dummy half. And you see the dummy halves like Joey Lussick and Brendan Hands and Woods practicing as well at the end of training sessions. So when they're in the extras, they're out there not just doing their practicing of the passing, but they'll also practice those kicks out of dummy half. And it just adds that extra dimension to the game because they might only have a crack once, maybe twice at the most in a game, but it can make a very, very big difference depending on when it comes. So, Yeah, when
it comes to playing the Penrith Panthers 60s, it is simultaneously so simple and so complex. And the complexities come with some of the attacking shapes and how you have to reposition your defensive line to the different weapons they have. And the Eels obviously use a lot of second phase football against Penrith to try and be disruptive. And there are, even with the chaos of offloading, there are certain structures they use to maximise that ability. But realistically, you talk about the simple side of it, and it comes back to the cliche winning the collisions. The Penrith Panthers have been the kings of contact across their 3-year reign as the best in the NRL. They consistently win from their back five through to their front row, through the middle. And if you want to beat them, you've got to match them there or better them somehow through those corridors in the ruck.
Yeah, and I think the Eels, more than any other team, make the Penrith forwards work harder. They because they're chasing that collision, to use that cliche, they're making them work harder in defence. And whereas the Panthers are getting that a little bit of a rest, the forwards, through all the good work of the back five. And look, let's face it, all teams back five are doing that now. It just so happens that the Panthers are particularly good at it, at getting those metres. But all teams are looking to give their forwards a break now. The Eels just keep winning that forward battle when they're playing the Panthers. That's been the key to them beating the Panthers. They unsettle them. They don't have them thinking that they're that they've got the control that they're usually afforded in games. Now, we know, unfortunately, only too well that the Panthers didn't allow that to happen in the games that mattered in final series. And I guess it doesn't matter how many times you beat a team in the regular rounds. The games that really matter are those finals games. And the Panthers in those matches, well, particularly the grand final, they got control early and they just didn't relinquish it.
Yes.
The finals match that we played against them, when there was a bit of controversy when Mitch Moses was taken out of the game via Jerome Luai. That one's, sticks in the craw a bit because the Panthers got the victory, but I thought the Eels matched them in that particular game. Everyone saw what happened in that game.
Yeah,
it was an absurdity. The
Will Smith high tackle, Moses being taken off the ball.
Yeah. So there was plenty that didn't unfold the way it should have in terms of officiating, but we won't. There's no point in going back and talking about that now. I just wanted to make mention of the fact that you've got to get that control early against the Panthers. If their forwards match or get on top of the Eels forwards, then there's a good chance it's good night, because the likes of Moses and Brown, they're not going to be able to do their thing behind a beaten pack. So, it then becomes interesting as to how the Eels decide to have their rotation happening, especially with regard to whether Junior starts or comes off the bench. Now, you could make a case for Junior starting because of how important it is to get
Leota and Fisher Harris as well.
Get the ascendancy early. However, there was nothing wrong with what Joe Offengowie brought early in that game last week, and being able to maintain the rage when there is a rotation made with Junior coming off the bench, and it then becomes like this relentless barrage of big bodies coming at them, coming at the opposition. There's plenty to be said for that as well. If I'm going to make a tip, I'm going to say Junior comes off the bench again.
I do like the role that Junior has as that hammer, that sledgehammer off the interchange, and I think it's a good fit for him. As it's not like he's winding down; he's still in outstanding athletic condition. But you talk about transitioning to a different role, and just the strength of the Eels being through the middle, the amount of players they have. Woody's not starting; he's not even in this game 60s, and he could easily start alongside Reagan Campbell-Gillard, hypothetically. We saw that last year being the making of him. So, yeah, I do like Junior being an interchange. Again, it's not a slur. It's not a negative on a player. The interchange plays such an integral role in winning games. And
he got over 160.
He was dominant off the interchange, exactly. And again, it plays to the strengths of this team. I think he ended up either very similar or maybe a few
more minutes than what Reg had starting the game.
Exactly. There is nothing wrong with coming off the interchange. It is so key to winning these big games. So I would be interested in seeing Junior coming off the bench this week. Bring Joe into the starting team, I imagine. You could even bring Ryan Madison in too, but I think Maddo, again, has that role where he can come off the interchange and just play to the end of the game if you need him to. And I think that really suits his skill set within the team really nicely. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think that's probably the right play here. And like we said, you got to win the middle. Penrith, if you give Cleary the time and space and Yo as well, and then obviously outside of that, Luai, who is electric once he has the space to start using his footwork, you're gonna run into troubles against Penrith Panthers. So win the middle, and it's gonna be a hostile crowd out there. 60s first home game of the season for the Panthers, but they've had back-to-back losses. Right, they had the World Cup Challenge where they dropped it, and then coming against the Melbourne Storm where they got shut out. So they're going to be fired up for this one, even more so than usual, which means the Eels are going to need to bring their A+++ game.
And not only that, the other thing that we know about the Panthers is they play for 80 minutes.
Oh, yeah. They don't. Like I said, it was a game of the year. I think it was probably the best game of the year, round 4 last year, where the Eels got taken the golden point on the back of the Panthers playing 80 minutes with that ridiculous, 45-metre field goal from Nathan Cleary. So we actually saw the Panthers play for more than 80 minutes in that game. And thankfully, the Eels were able to deliver the big counter blow at the start of Golden Point with Mitchell Moses replying in similar circumstances of a really good field goal of his own. But yeah, they're a dynasty. Like they are the first real. I know people argue the Broncos in the 90s. I'd say probably since the Eels of the 80s. The three-peat in the circumstances that are the modern NRL, as much as you don't like the Panthers, they're Western City rivals. They got some interesting personalities that don't always jive well to modern sensibilities, I suppose. But as a team, they're phenomenal, and you got to give them their due respect. They are the Kings, and the Eels. And while the Eels have been probably their best competitors, it's taken outstanding efforts from Parramatta every time to get the wins.
Mate, I despise some of the personalities in their team. Not all of them, but there's a number there that rub me the wrong way as a player. However, if you can't acknowledge the greatness of their individuals and the supreme quality of them as a team. I mean, like you talk about a three-peat in the modern game. The three-peat, the third one to be achieved under the circumstances that it was last year, where I'm sure the only people that didn't think that the game was over was the Penrith players themselves. Because I was watching the game and, even though there was a little nagging thought at the back of my mind that the game's not over yet, by the same token, I was ready to rejoice the Panthers not going three-peat. Like, I was ready to start hitting the social media. But in the end, you look at that performance of Nathan Cleary, and I was full of praise the previous year when they beat us in the grand final, and I thought Dylan Edwards was just it was close to the best fullback performance I think I'd ever seen in a grand final. Nathan Cleary, like, it was in another universe.
I mean, the mental fortitude to put 60 minutes of ordinary football from both his team and himself behind himself. I mean, you see the replays, the highlights. Reece Walsh embarrassed Cleary a couple of times in that game defensively when they were red hot, the Broncos. That 20 minutes or 18 minutes it might have been, I think it was the 62nd minute they scored their first try, is probably the most pure, distilled masterwork of halfback play you ever see. That was as good as anything Joey Johns has done. Jonathan Thurston, sorry. I was getting sports codes mixed up there with NFL. That was ridiculous. He dragged them kicking and screaming almost towards the win. So,
well, you know what? We were talking before when we were doing the New South Wales Cup preview about that the quality of that Blaze Talangi seems to have about being able to put
Clearly,
a mistake behind
Nathan Cleary
the
possesses
goldfish.
that in buckets.
That
It's got a dump truck of it.
You're talking about the ones who are players that you talk about in the future, the elite players. They're the ones that are capable of just doing that. Just, you know what has just happened matters nothing. What's about to happen matters everything. And it's all about what's about to happen next. The moment that something's happened, it's done. It's then the next moment and the moment after that and the moment after that. And everything is focused on what that next moment is and what he's trying to achieve and what the team are trying to achieve together.
Yep.
And it was, as you said, it was literally like he dragged his teammates kicking and screaming towards an improbable win, but a win that it was, a three-peat. And now, of course, they go down as a team that will be talked about in rugby league history. So what we can't afford this week is for them to have that mental edge, that self-belief that we know it's going to exist in a team that is as good as they are, but you just want them to have just the slightest of doubts in their head. You want them to feel some pain, the Eels forwards to hurt them, to make them, maybe, look up as they're about to catch a ball. Make them think twice about stepping one way rather than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Make them look for an alternative for who to run at and perhaps put off their natural game or the game plan in some way. Without question, where the Eels have to be better is defensively out wide. There is no escaping that fact. And it's all about, and for out wide, it's all about what happens just inside them and the communication going across the line.
Yeah.
We've spoken about this before. Every team operates a slide defence. The difference between the teams is how well they execute it. And it's, so you can talk about, coaches that it might be particularly good with their defence systems. Try looking across the teams this weekend and see if you can pick up major differences between the teams in how they defend. There isn't a major difference. There might be minor differences. Perhaps it might be in the role of certain players or what they get them to do under different circumstances. But essentially the systems are pretty close to each other. And it's a matter of, communication, execution, all that sort of stuff. So we need our outside backs to be just that little bit better. I'm actually buoyed by what we saw from Morgan Harper and Bailey Simonson on the weekend. I think they seem to have a good understanding, which you may not expect to see from players that haven't got that background of playing alongside each other in the past. And they were competing for the same spot during the pre-season. Not exclusively, because there were times where Bailey Simonson was training out on the wing. Not all the time, but enough that you could see that they were looking for what happens if we need him to play wing. So who knows, maybe Brad was thinking, geez, the way Sivo comes in on his tackles, I'm going to lose him for a few games here and there to suspension.
Had the contingency plan prepared, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, that's just my comment. That's not saying that's what happened. But, as I was saying, I was buoyed by the combination of Harper and Simonson, especially like that last try. That was a centre and a winger working well together, because that was a moment where a loose ball was swooped on, and you could see that Harper was looking to position Simonson, and likewise Simonson knew exactly what his role had to be, and he was very quickly up in support for the break and finished it off as you want a winger to finish off. We spoke about it last week. I'm not 100% confident that Sivo would have been positionally the same as Simonson in that moment.
No, I think that's fair.
And I'd almost be 70% confident that wouldn't have been the case. I mean, we know where Sivo brings the action. We know where Sivo is unstoppable. In our own end of the field, that's not necessarily the case. So anyway, mate, I guess we're at the point now where we're going to give a prediction.
Yeah, so we jump into predictions, which means obviously the on-field result, first try scorer, best on field. And I was just looking at the recent history between the two teams, 60s, and it's interesting reading because I think when you go back through Penrith's premiership run, and then you consider the Eels and the Panthers at full strength during those regular season games, because each team's got an outlier blowout game. I think the one where the Panthers played our New South Wales Cup team in the last round of the season a couple of years ago, and then the game where Nathan Cleary got sent off for the spear tackle on Dylan Brown were both blowouts. I think the biggest margin, and obviously the game last year where we shocked them with the big 14-point win at the end, but in between that, it's mostly 1, 2, or 6-point wins between either team, with the favouring Eels mostly. So, yeah, interesting stuff, and I think that probably lays the table for an insight into what it might take to beat the Panthers this week. So I will tip I don't want it to be a field goal, 60s. I don't want it to be a field goal. I'll go for a 2-point win. Maybe 24-22, 22-20, that sort of range. I don't know. It's not going to be good for the heart either way.
Well, you know what? It's funny that you're coming up with this idea because I'm tipping a 22-18 victory to the Eels.
Yeah, good numbers.
So I'm tipping 3 converted tries for the Panthers, 4 tries, 3 conversions for the Eels. The Eels holding on. I'm going to predict a best on field for Jermaine Hopgood, and I'm going to tip Will Penasini to be first try scorer.
I like it. Yeah, best on field. It almost feels cheating to go to the spine or one of those core players because we sort of set that bar for them. So if I look outside the spine, I feel like Ryan Madison has pretty good games against the Penrith Panthers. Maybe off the interchange, Maddo could be a sneaky little game changer there this week. So I'll go for
that's a big call off the interchange.
Off the interchange, something a little bit more esoteric there, a little bit, away from the comfort picks of the 1, 6, 7, 9. And then in terms of first try scorer, let's double down with the forwards. I do like Will Penasini as a pick though, but let's go maybe Sean Lane this week. So we'll go with Dillbags and Sean Lane combining there to score the points.
Mate, I love the way you were able to throw into a podcast the word esoteric. And, that you'd almost say it was esoteric.
Yeah, the nature of actually throwing it out there, exactly.
I challenge people to listen to a football podcast that includes the word esoteric in it.
There you go.
We'll have a bit of a challenge this year, mate, to find a word or two.
Yeah, word of the day for each podcast, exactly.
That you're not going to find in too many other rugby league podcasts, let alone sports podcasts in general. So well done there. Okay, mate. Well, I think that's probably a fine place to wrap things up for our preview podcast.
Yes, sir.
And as you did at the start of this podcast, our thanks to sponsors Big Swing Golf at Northmead. If you're looking for a great place to enjoy yourself with simulated golf, a whole range of other sports that you can play on their technology down there, after work with your mates, with your work colleagues, birthday parties, whatever you like, get down there. The also Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, they've been with us for basically forever as far as the Cumberland Throw is concerned. So we really appreciate not just their support, but their long-term support. So thanks to Greg there. And also a shout out to Paraleagues, who are tremendous supporters of junior rugby league in the Parramatta district. They make it so much cheaper for young players to be able to participate in rugby league with their financial backing, and they also support our coverage of the junior representative team. And of course, they are the venue at which you can see the Cumberland Throw live, either before or after home games at CommBank Stadium. So thank you to all of those sponsors. And as I always say, mate, go you mighty Eels.